opportunity to get everyone together. We're sort of on the same team with Jam, but in a good way. Obviously, this year has been absolutely, completely turned on its head with the events of this virus, and everyone is now endeavouring to communicate with that and find different ways to just A, fill the time, B, find ways of retasking your season if possible, and getting your head around, obviously, this completely dynamic scenario. So, as I said, Oscar, before you come on, mate, I'm the oldest on the line here by a long shot, so I'm the boss. And, but once we get going, you guys can interject. I'm going to do a few questions that are pretty relevant for all of you, obviously, which across the sports you do. But I just thought it'd be good just to let you guys introduce yourself, let us know who and what you do and where you are in the world right now. And I'm going to start with Kelsey, if that's right. Kelsey?
Yeah, easy, cool. Hey everyone, it's nice to actually see everyone's faces. This is an awesome idea. So javelin thrower, which is quite, everyone always seems to say like, oh, I remember throwing javelin through high school, and always get the comment after that like, I used to always land it like tail first. So that's always a really fun way to introduce myself when I talk about javelin throw. I'm based in Canberra. So this is home for me, and this is where I train out of the institute. So we're still here at the moment, which is, I was just saying to a couple of guys before, it's quite different for us. We normally head over to Europe, literally end of the month, and we're normally there through the summer. So we're coming up to our first winter in Canberra in 6 years. So it's going to be very different for us.
Yeah. And you just casually mentioned your throw javelin. Obviously, you are the current world champion, so we should just mention that.
Yeah.
Very, very cool, but you are the best in the world at the moment, and so we're very proud of you, and congratulations on that. Max, where are you, mate? What do you do? Of course, I know what you bloody do, but we're recording this, mate, and what are you up to?
Yeah, well, I'm Max Frick. I race Speedway. So right now I'm based in the UK, whilst we're in lockdown right now. But I'm originally from Mansfield in Victoria, by Mount Buller. And so normally this time of the season we're starting to kick off. Everything's getting pretty busy. I should have had my first race last weekend, but obviously right now everything's kind of been turned on its head. So for now we're just sitting tight, waiting for some good news and continuing life, really. Yeah,
extraordinary. And Kelsey, if you don't know, Max's bikes have no brakes, by the way. So his bike racing is quiet, but those guys race with no brakes. So it's actually next level, but a little bit more of that later. So they are mental. Mitch, we've worked together for a long time, obviously, buddy, but it's just good to get a bit of background on a snapshot of your journey. Where are you now? And what you're supposed to be doing this year.
Yeah. Well, nice to meet everyone. It's a bit of a strange circumstance to meet everyone through Zoom, but this is where we're at. I'm coming to you from Monaco. I live in Monaco. I'm originally from New Zealand. I race Formula E, a championship that's been quite new to the world in the last few years. We're actually meant to be racing currently. We're sort of meant to be mid-season, but that's obviously been put on hold. So yeah, in my little apartment here in Monaco, trying not to go crazy, but it's nice to hear other people's stories because we get sort of caught up in our own little world and bubble. So I'm really fascinated to hear, especially Max and Kelsey, because I know a bit more about Oscar and we're in the same sort of department. So just to speak about our sort of designated sports and stuff. So great idea, Mark.
No worries, mate. Yeah, good stuff. Young Oscar, you got the two lights. It looks like you got some horns, mate. It looks good. I like the lights. They look like you got some horns above your head, mate.
Hey, I've got... Nah, that's right. We'll leave it like that.
Yeah, where are you in your career? What are you about? Bit of background, buddy.
No worries. I'm racing in F3 this year. So in motorsport like Mitch. Yeah, I'm currently in Melbourne at home, which is a bit ironic because this is the longest stay I've had at home in the last 5 or 6 years. And yeah, usually I'm based in the UK, so I'm supposed to be finishing school in 2 months in the UK. It's a bit uncertain on what's happening there at the moment because our exams have been cancelled, so still finding out what's happening with that. And then yeah, once all this is back over, I'll be based in Oxford in the UK near Renault F1. And yeah, just waiting until everything starts up again.
Yeah, well times, mate. Kelsey, Olympic Games this year, unbelievable. Like I would never ever have thought. Like I was at the Australian Grand Prix, Oscar was down there, was sort of ready to go. We thought, yeah, I arrived on the Wednesday. Even Wednesday, I thought, I reckon we're a pretty good chance of this going ahead. I never in my wildest dreams thought that, you know, the Olympics was going to be cancelled. Just run us through. I mean, you're on a 4-year. I mean, you won the World Championships last year in Doha. You have Diamond League. You have a lot of other meetings that you compete in around the world. And, you know, whether it's in the States or in Europe. But we all know the Olympics is absolutely ginormous. It's every 4 years. How did that news come to you? How did you take it? And also, you know, you're in a cycle. I think you've got maybe, you know, a couple of Olympics, right? So unbelievable.
Yeah, huge news in the sporting world. And yeah, so I mean, track and field, we have a major championship every year, but we certainly get our most exposure in an Olympic year. So it is definitely like one of the biggest years on the calendar for track and field. So I guess there was a lot of talk about the fact that it was going to go ahead regardless. And then they started talking about plans of putting us in like a holding camp before they actually moved us into the Olympic Village. Like there was just so much talk about how they were going to make it happen. And then it started getting to a point like, oh, this is starting to become unrealistic that it's going to happen. There was talk of it's either going to go ahead or it's going to get cancelled. And that is probably the worst sort of like set of words you can put next to an Olympic Games.
How did you find out? How did you literally find out?
Yeah, no kidding. I woke up the morning of and checked my phone, and it was one of the first like sort of news feeds that came through was postponement of Olympic Games. So, wow. I mean, it happens all so quickly. I think it happened in a matter of like 3 days from them saying we're discussing options of postponement to then them saying, yep, we've decided on postponement. So sort of like flicked through a couple of news articles to make sure that that was legitimate news.
Wasn't April 1?
Actually don't recall the date.
My days, but you wanted it to be, but it wasn't, unfortunately.
Yeah, that'd be the worst thing ever. I'd probably like cry at anybody that did that on April Fools.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have essentially this year becomes a holding pattern for us. It does mean that our World Championships that was scheduled for next year was actually today confirmed the dates for 2022. And it means we have a double up of a World Championships and a Commonwealth Games in that year now. Wow. And they're a week apart. So yeah, our whole calendar's kind of been flipped. Yeah. But yeah, essentially as it stands, we sort of have no competitions this year. And we sort of, even talking of comps towards the end of the year, we're really uncertain of the likelihood of us being able to travel overseas. So very, very strange year for us.
Yeah, I think all of us as a group, I mean, obviously I'm a geriatric and Finnish, but watching all of you guys still trying to compete and seeing these programs being really tightened down and condensed up, and just the toll, you know, even if we do get going again, of course we will, but you know how that looks in motorsport, that looks in track and field, in your instance, Kelsey, in terms of how tight the program is going to be. Obviously, you know, any small niggles or injuries or anything that normally we have a bit of margin, where now everyone's can get their self in line, obviously, in terms of their preparations, but it's clearly way too much time for everyone. So yeah, those type programs, to see how they really play out. And this is where it's fascinating with you, Max, because I think that your sport is really misunderstood in terms of how much travel you do. And I've been following your sport for decades. Probably 2005 was the first time I went to some big meetings in the UK, and I've been to Poland and Germany and lots of events throughout Europe. And just give us a snapshot of what a normal season looks like for you. You know, you've qualified for the World Cup now, so there's obviously riders only get selected to race at the highest level for the Speedway for the World Championships. And then you can race for different leagues and countries, right, and regions. So give us a snapshot of what normal looks like, and now, you know, what Speedway are trying to do to sort of, you know, I mean, you tapped on it a little bit before, mate, but what might a program look like at the end of the year?
Yeah, well, normally for Speedway, we race for our leagues, which in different leagues, which is our clubs. So I'll normally race in Swedish league, Polish league, and in the past I've raced in English league as well, which I'm not doing this year. But each league is kind of like a football league. You'll race, you know, for a team which is normally named after a city, and basically two cities will race against each other. And there's a point scoring system to who will win that league match. And then we go all the way through to finals and stuff like that. So that normally keeps me pretty busy because I'll race Polish league on a Sunday, English league on a Monday, Swedish league on a Tuesday. And then now I've got qualified for the Grand Prix for this year. So I have Grand Prix on a Friday and Saturday each week. So it turns out to be a pretty busy schedule most weeks. So for all that traveling to then just stop, it's been a bit of a change, but you know, I'm sure they're going to work things out. But Polish league is probably our most important league that we do, and they've, you know, they were one of the first countries to kind of shut down pretty early on when I think they only had 2 or 3 cases of coronavirus. So I think I've been speaking to them a fair bit, and they're hoping to get underway pretty soon. But I think, you know, no one really knows at this stage. I think everyone's just hoping, really. But for now, I think we can just kind of wait around and wait for a little bit of news, really.
Yeah. How many flights would you do a year, mate? I know how many, because you know, on a good night you will race 7 races. The races are obviously only a couple of minutes long, but I'm not trivializing that. You know, you could do how many flights a year, and sometimes you're sleeping in back of vans, right? Getting in between countries, and you know, so you can get your head down and get to these next race meetings, and so you're there for when the flag drops at the next venue. Yeah,
pretty much. So I think last year I did a fair bit because I raced in quite a few Grand Prix as a reserve. So someone within the series that was there full time got injured, and then I was kind of one of the replacements. So I got into most of the Grand Prix last year, which you know, added to a pretty busy schedule. So between that World Cup, Polish league, Swedish league, and English league, I did about basically 95 to 100 flights that I can count, but I'm not 100% sure if that's exactly accurate either. And then I think races I did about 85, and then we have a whole lot of practice in between that as well. You know, we're normally testing on Friday, Saturday, that we're not racing in the Grand Prix. So you know, there's a fair bit of bike time in between, and obviously they're short races, so we're not, you know, it's not a huge amount of laps, but we're just most of the time it's traveling kind of takes a toll on us the most. And like you say, we'll be in the van quite a lot. Say if we have a Grand Prix in, you know, Czech or Slovakia or Germany, or, you know, even Sweden or Denmark sometimes, we got to get back to Polish league on a Sunday, and most of the time, you know, it's just easier to get in the van, and you know, they're well kitted out. We have beds and stuff in there, so you can actually get a lot better rest traveling in the van to Poland the next day, rather than, you know, trying to get back to the hotel late and getting an early flight in the morning to Poland. Probably get a better rest if we just jump in the van. So a lot of the time we're we do get in the vans and travel around a fair bit also.
Yeah, you trust your mechanics a lot more than I would, mate, driving and sleep in the back of the van. But
Yeah.
wild trips, mate. But Mitch, again, mate, your year huge. You're on absolute fire in Formula E. You're the man of the season, really, in many ways, with some of the drives you've done this year, and second in the championship now, putting a huge amount of pressure on for line honours ultimately at the end of the year. But the season's been decimated because people that aren't aware, Formula E sort of runs over a different sort of seasons, traditional motorsport seasons, where it runs across the sort of winter phase, if you like, compared to the normal traditional summer season. So you would have been, how far into the season now, Mitch, if things were underway? And yeah, so just give us a snapshot of what's happening in Formula E world and going forward from here.
Yeah, it's a bit strange for us because, normally motorsport championships start sort of February, March, and then run till end of the year. We run the season started in November, and then we've had a few races over January, February, and then, we just obviously had a race like a month ago. That was our last one. So we're sort of halfway through. So we run until July. So for us to be sort of not doing much, just halfway through a season is obviously, the circumstances is weird in general, but to be halfway through a season is bizarre. So I was on good form, so it sort of adds to the frustration because you just want to keep the good times rolling, and that's sort of been put on pause. So I'm like a bit of a dog in a cage at the moment, trying to get out as quickly as possible. But there's obviously bigger things in the world going on, so I think everyone sort of understands that. But yeah, it's strange not to be or just not knowing when you're going to be out next. There's talks of it maybe resuming back in June or July, which is probably a little bit optimistic at the moment. But I think we can run until about September until we're going to start thinking about next season. So the weird thing about our racing is that we've got basically 90% of our races are done on the streets around cities. So to start moving these events around is really complicated. So we may have to go to permanent facilities and circuits, which we've never done before, which would be a shame. But if we can do that just to get some races in, that would be awesome. So the plan now for Formula E is obviously just trying to get another probably 2 or 3 races in just to sort of complete the season, and then obviously finish hopefully around September, and then focus for next season, which will start in November.
Yeah, interesting. It's quite actually. I just think about Max, with you, sort of very, very old school motorsport, but really traditional and hardcore racing in terms of you got your beautiful 2-stroke and loads of noise, and Mitch is obviously in sort of leading edge technology in Formula E and silent racing, let's say. So your stuff is really, really, as I say, traditional and nearly archaic to a degree, but really, really hard to get right and generate the power and all those type of things. And Mitch at the other end is he's stealth racer, right? So he's it's interesting how in these times where you're both really at the sort of going to the peaks of your careers and still in motorsport, there's so many different facets of how we can, whether it's 2 or 4 wheels, go about our sports. It's interesting, isn't it?
And also volume as well. Like I'm doing 13, 14 races a year.
Yeah.
And Max is up to 80 or something. So it's just the different structures in each sort of industry is fascinating to see.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see like how different they can be. At the same time, we're all here trying to, all been basically put on hold whilst all this is happening. But it's really cool to see everyone. Yeah,
no, it's wicked. And racing drivers, mate, they're really tough. Like when we break a fingernail, like we really have to go to hospital. And like you bike guys just really. You bike guys, it's another level, Max. What you get up to with your injuries and riding. Oscar, I'm going to get you in a second, mate. Max, what's the most ridiculous injury you've competed with?
I fractured my spinous processes, so on the back of 2 vertebrae in my neck a couple of years ago, and I had a pretty big concussion with it at the same time. I think I raced 2 weeks later, but there wasn't. Yeah. And that was at the same time I was kind of going
That's
into
2 years off, mate, in our little sort of land of single-seater racing. So yeah, you guys,
different breed.
Yes, Oscar, mate, you haven't even got going yet. Obviously, well, same with Max. Obviously, Kelsey was trying to get going. She had some meetings abandoned at the start of the year, but you came down to Melbourne. You're with the Renault Formula One team as one of their juniors, and you've basically been. I mean, I like the idea of missing exams, mate. That would have been brilliant. Absolutely. I know you're an absolute when it comes to the curriculum side of things. You've been smashing that as well, but yeah, in Melbourne, I saw you quickly, and you haven't even turned a wheel yet, mate. So you're on the F1 calendar, right? You go to those,
Yeah.
but so it's pretty much copy paste of what the news is in Formula One. But how are you going in Melbourne? And just what are you hearing? You're driving for an Italian team. What's the latest you're in?
So yeah, the latest on my end is so our championship's supposed to be 9 rounds, and there's 2 races at each round, so 18 races, and I think they're going to try and get 8 in. Obviously, F1 might have a little bit of leeway trying to fit us into some of their other races because we're not a support for every one of their races. But yeah, I think some of the races like Zandvoort and I think mainly just Zandvoort and Bahrain, they're going to try and reschedule for later in the year. So hopefully we still get close to a full calendar. There's talks about whether the Macau GP will be a championship round. Obviously, that would be pretty interesting for guys that don't know Macau. It's crazy. It's like it's a street circuit that in this era of F3 cars is pretty crazy to be racing around. So to have that as part of a championship is pretty crazy. But yeah, I think if everything goes back to normal soon enough, Bahrain will be our final round, hopefully in November time.
Very similar tracks, mate. Bahrain and Macau, aren't they? There's not much difference.
Yeah. Just there's a couple of differences, a couple of walls here and there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so at the moment, I'm just trying to keep myself busy. I've got a sim at home, so doing a bit of sim racing. Just keeping my fitness up. Doing a bit of schoolwork, just anticipating what's going to happen with that, and just trying to make the most of my time at home.
What are you allowed to do in Victoria with fitness, mate? Are you what's legal down there in that great state of yours?
So in terms of our lockdown, we're on stage 3, I think now. So we can only leave the house for food, medical attention, caring for someone or exercise. So I can still go running and cycling and stuff. And then we've got a pretty decent home gym set up at home. So in terms of gym facilities and whatnot, it's actually not impacting me that much. So that's also good. And just going down to the basement to do my gym instead of somewhere else.
Is stage 4 no wheelies on the push bike? Is that stage 4? You can't do wheelies?
I don't know. I think stage 4 is probably no one's allowed. Everyone's, barge boards on the windows and no one's allowed out. Police walking around. So I don't know. Hopefully it doesn't get to that stage.
We don't want to go there. Interesting for the other 3 gentlemen here. When I spoke to Kelsey last year, it was fascinating to hear about when she competes and she puts her javelin in. Kelsey, it's probably best you explain, but I was blown away. In our industry, we would be paranoid about what you have to do with the access to the other competitors. So explain how that works, because the guys will be quite surprised on it.
Yeah, so with our javelins, we can take them to each of our competitions, and then we enter them into the pool, into the comp. They get sort of like checked for their specs and their weight and everything. But once it's entered into the competition, anyone is allowed to throw that javelin. So it is essentially a free-for-all.
No.
Whether it's your javelin, someone else's javelin, or the competition javelins, it is literally like, yep, go for it.
So
Yeah,
everyone
why is
picks
that?
the same javelin.
Yep. I guess because they all have to fit a certain specification and a certain, as I said, like weight parameters and everything. So it's just fair game. You sort of can't say no, that one's mine, you're not allowed to throw it. Mind you, I've seen girls try and do that, but it doesn't work out very well.
Mm-hmm.
Have you often used someone else's Kelsey or not? Or you've always used would you ever resort to that tactic, or how does it happen? Is it just a bit of fine print in the sporting regs, but it never happens, or it always does?
It happens more often than you'd think. And the most frustrating part is that it's often the girls that live within Europe that don't take their javelins. So generally speaking, it is like the internationals. So like myself, the American Cara, the South African Sunette, we will all take our own javelins and put them in the competitions. And the girls that are like, the girls that are like an hour away will come with no javelins and then use ours to throw them. I know. And there's always like one or two that generally most of the girls will throw. So one of them is the one that I throw, and I threw it at World Championships. It is like the most common javelin for the girls to throw. So mine gets an absolute beating when it comes to comps.
Oh. Wow.
What happens if your javelin, like I'm guessing they don't break very easily, but what happens if someone else breaks your javelin?
You blow up at them. As I said, that is like
right through them. Yeah, just next to they're the target next time around. Yeah.
I can't believe that.
A failure, a javelin failure is rare, right? I mean, not gonna. That's.
I've only seen it happen once, and it was because it actually hit a sprinkler out in the field, so the tip snapped off it.
Yeah.
I've seen one or two videos where the javelin snapped out of someone's hand, but I've never seen that in person.
What was the one where some guy threw a javelin into another person on the field that actually hit him, didn't it?
Yes. So that was a while ago, like early 2000s. And I think it sort of happened because the long jump runway was kind of in the middle of the field, whereas normally on the outsides of the track. But yeah, one of the javelin throwers hit it quite far off sector, and it actually skilled one of the long jumpers in competition.
Jesus.
That's a bad.
So
yeah.
No, but don't worry, it doesn't happen very often.
But Max, you're going to be versatile too, because you can shunt. Well, bikes can get wrecked pretty easy in crashes, and you've got to dust yourself down literally and go back. Sometimes you've got 2 minutes in between turning around to compete again. So you're probably the next in line in terms of having to be that dynamic in terms of equipment.
Yeah, so we normally carry 2 to 3 bikes with this everywhere, and then in the pits wherever we go, especially Grand Prix, we have 2 bikes in the pits and then a spare bike in Park Ferme. So if we get off at some point throughout the day, and our bikes do bend very easily, and then it's written off for the meeting. So then we'll pull out a secondary bike, and hopefully that goes just as good. But quite often there'll be people changing engines and stuff like that throughout meetings if they're, crashed and they want, the engine out of one bike and put into another bike. So it can all be done pretty quick because the bikes are quite basic. But it's pretty easy, and it happens quite a lot more than you'd realize that, you have a crash and your bike's bent, and if you've got time and you still want to race that engine or, parts from another bike, and, we can swap things over pretty quick. But, you know, there's lots of times where you'll have a big crash and you're pretty sore, or, you know, knock the wind out of yourself maybe. And you've got, you know, basically, you know, with television and stuff like that, you're basically on a clock. They're trying to get you out as quick as possible.
Yeah, no, fascinating. So we're going to go around quickly. Well, we've still got a bit of time, but because I don't think we've got much on. But in terms of the Oscar, what have you learned anything you've outside your gym, outside stage 3, outside simulator, outside blah 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 blah? This has been an interesting leveler for all of us in terms of reflection and whatnot, depending where you are in your life. Obviously, having to adjust to something extraordinary, personally, professionally, all sorts. So I'm going to throw it out there. Is there anything on the radar that's happening or will happen, or that would not have happened if it wasn't for this? What are you doing, Oscar?
Well, the other day I cooked my first meal for the family. So I made pasta and pasta sauce. Well, I didn't make the pasta, but I made the pasta sauce. Wasn't bad for a first attempt. Definitely some refinements are needed. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm still a teenager, so sleep still is a big priority. So that takes up a lot of my day. But yeah, I mean, when I go back to the UK, I'll be living with another guy from the Renault Academy Cairo. So we'll have to fend for ourselves. So I'll probably have to learn how to wash a few things and make a few more things in the kitchen.
Well, yeah. I remember young Mitcho coming over to the UK around 16. He was on the numbers pretty early, mate, with his cooking. So, yeah, if you need any tips, Mitch was... you mate, your carbonara was, what was your signature punch when you were 4 years?
Actually, I made it the other day because I've had about 4 years of retirement of cooking. It was some funky pasta, but yeah, I can get the recipe for him. It's a good one.
Hey, hit me up anytime for recipes.
Yeah, okay.
Cool. Nice.
It had a bit of kick to it, didn't it, Mitch?
Yeah, there was a bolognese, which was pretty good, but I lost the recipe for that. And then there's another one with like pumpkin and chorizo sausage and stuff. It's pretty different, but it's awesome. So
yeah, all right, we'll get that cranked up. Kelsey, are we doing anything now that? Well, I'm not. You know, I've seen you on Instagram. You're doing lots of nice walks, bits and bobs, and you're getting out and about and doing some different things, which clearly you wouldn't have been able to do with competition on. So, but any other skills or different things outside that might not have come on the radar, but could do now?
Yeah, well, actually, it's funny that you bring up cooking because it's the thing I miss most when we travel. Normally goes like 3.5 months eating fairly basic food. So I have brushed out all my cookbooks and I'm diving into a whole new world of learning some skills in the kitchen and tackling some recipes which are normally put in the when I have time basket. So now that I've got all the time in the world, I'm actually challenging myself a little bit. And yeah, just trying to pick up a few of my hobbies, which again have been on the back burner for a couple of years. So brought out like the colored pencils and watercolors and stuff, and trying to actually get some fine art skills back.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maxo, are you ramping the cooking up, or you already Gordon Ramsay?
No, I'm not much of a cook myself. I can cook, I can survive, but normally my girlfriend Georgina's got it covered, so I'll leave her to that. she's been working hard in the kitchen though. I feel like everyone else. We're going shopping after this, so that'll be interesting. We haven't been in the shops for about 2 weeks now, so we'll have to fight some people off. Try and get some toilet roll.
Put your gear on. Put your helmet on. Gear on.
Yeah, we'll have goggles, face masks, the gloves. Crash helmet.
Better than half the masks out there now. Another quick one. I get inundated with people asking about, it's a bit of a random one, but obviously we're all from the Southern Hemisphere, but I know Mitch is from New Zealand, and he really, when he comes to Australia, he loves his snakes and spiders.
Yeah, right.
got some he's got a couple of phobias, which we should just table in the board meeting.
Look how nervous he's getting talking about it.
The real creepy spiders that just fall around maybe on his face when he's asleep. But Oscar, how are you with the wildlife, mate? What do our European friends ask you loads of questions about that we're all crocodile Dundees down here and there's kangaroos in the streets?
Yeah, I mean, when I first went to boarding school, obviously I was the only Australian there, so you get the questions of do you ride a kangaroo to school, and do you have a pet snake and stuff, which of course you say yeah. And yeah, I mean, in terms of phobias, I mean, I'd rather not run into a snake or a spider, but I don't know, a spider's not too bad, but a snake, especially if you're out in the bush somewhere, there's a pretty good chance that if it gets you, it's not going to be a fun day. So yeah, I'm not too bad with them though.
That's good. Well, you can hang out with me and have him covered then. Max, are you all right with the creepy crawlies, mate?
I can deal with spiders. That's all right, but snakes, I'm not a fan of at all. We grew up with a little bit of land, and we always had snakes around. So, yeah, I definitely. The more and more I saw them, I think the more I disliked them. So,
That's
I'm
good.
not a fan.
Mitch has got a sweaty brow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I got to take off my jumper. Jeez.
Kelsey, are you all right?
Oh no, not a fan. And I've had a few run-ins recently with spiders, so Mike, just call Mike and he knows what's up straight away.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well,
yeah, he's a designated spider remover.
Yeah, he takes them all out. Same with me with Anne. She's just like, we go up into a room and it's like, have you seen what's in the room? No, have a look at that. He's all right, leave him there. No, we can't go to sleep with that there. Well, of course.
Yeah.
It was funny. I had actually John McGuinness, who's an Isle of Man TT legend, rides motorbikes around pretty much most wild circuits in the world, and he's nothing that guy can't do on a motorbike in terms of bravery. But same thing, he's been here with a spider, and I just love the Europeans on the wildlife front. Do you have any questions for each other's sports? I just think in terms of, I mean, we've got a bit of reaction times. We've got teams, obviously. You guys have big teams, small teams. Kelsey's absolutely on her own. You guys are on your own as well, but she's really has got, in terms of simplistic forms, a very, very basic sport in terms of what she's, the amount of expectation on her to get the job done. There's no excuses that we can throw around with engines and tyres and brakes and all the rest of it. She can't run that line. But is there any little questions that we'd like to ask each other, or
I'd like to ask Kelsey something.
Yeah.
Just with the Olympics now not going ahead this year, obviously in athletics and in sports where you got to really build up all your preparation and stuff to perform on that day. Now that obviously you've been working towards that for years, but obviously the last probably 12 months, 10 months I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but how do you now change your program to then to make sure you then perform when it comes to Olympics next year, and then obviously the following year with the Commonwealth Games and stuff? How do you time so you're performing at your best?
Yeah, so we sort of within each year we work with like a general training block, a preparation training block, and then a competition specific training block. So literally before all this happened, I had started my competition training block, which meant we were throwing more often, more regularly, and preparing the body to compete. Now, with everything that's happened, we've essentially gone back into a general training block, which means less throwing and a lot more general conditioning, general preparation for the body. And because of the way our seasons work, that general prep phase is often very, very short for us each year to turn around into the next competition phase. So at the moment, it just means we get a really, really big block of general prep before we move back into specific prep, and then again competition prep. So we often sort of cycle or undulate between all three of those blocks within a year. And then obviously those blocks make up for like 12 months leading into a competition specifically. So I guess what's really sort of like the silver lining for us at the moment is it's actually given us a lot of time to go back to some specifics of me, my body, and what I do as a javelin thrower, to actually spend some time nutting out some things that we often don't get time to do. And then another thing we've sort of learned over the year is not to get too far away from throwing, so that if we do have competitions come September and October, we can transition or move into that specific and competition training phase a lot smoother than we've done in the past. So yeah, essentially it's the same outline. It's just that everything's got more time in those blocks now.
Okay.
Max, in motorsport or four wheels, the guys can drive simulators. You, as far as I'm aware, that's not really an option with you boys. So are you still, obviously you're in lockdown, you can't ride your motorbike at the moment. So taking that a step further from what Kelsey just said, that she's got phases where you've got your general conditioning, mate. And I know you're in exceptional shape. You take that very, very serious. You've got a great sort of mentor in Simon Gerrans, your cousin there, Tour de France cyclist, and you've got that covered. But your sport, riding the bike, there can be some big gaps. So the racing guys can have a bit of a go with that muscle memory on the simulators because they're getting pretty handy now. But yeah, what's your headspace on sort of having the interaction with the bike?
Well, basically, obviously, Speedway is very specific and it's completely different to, I feel like riding any other form of motorcycle. So, but at the same time, there's a lot of similarities between, if you can ride, say, another form of motorbike. So I do a fair bit of, cross training on a motocross bike, things like that. More so with reaction times, and the bike will react in similar ways. So I can use that, and as a general fitness tool, it also works. So I do a fair bit on a motocross bike, but at the same time, right now, I can't do that either. So really, all I can do is just try and work on reflexes and things like that. With Speedway being so short, reflexes is a big thing. So really, just between a little bit of training and some reflex work, stuff like that, that's all we can do. And unfortunately, everyone's in the same boat, so we're all doing as much as we can in the way of competition. So there's not a whole lot we can really do. Yeah.
Reaction times. So what's Oscar? What are you doing before a start to have good reaction time? Because obviously the lights going out is reasonably important in our sport. So do you have any tricks for reaction times? Because obviously, I don't know if you know much about Speedway, or you'll see the tape. They don't have lights. They have a tape system where they put the front wheel against the tapes. The tapes go up and the boys go for it. So reaction times are interesting with all the sports. Obviously, you've got timing, Kelsey. Clearly, you can go when you want, and you've got to execute and get everything loaded and just fire that cannon as best you can. But obviously, these guys have got to react to something. So you three young lads, just table what you do, some of the things you might do specifically very close to a race to help the reaction times, if anything.
I do a bit of like tennis ball work, reaction stuff against the wall before I jump in the car, and just to get everything a bit on edge and get your fast twitch fibers going. But then once I'm in the car, it's basically just look at the lights, drop the clutch, and send it when they go out. Basically, there's not really much to it. And I mean, in our racing as well, it's not just reactions. Obviously, you've got the whole clutch release phase, wheel spin, how much throttle you put in. So generally in racing, I don't know about Formula E, but for us, it's usually more on the secondary phase of the start rather than all our reactions. Obviously, the reaction is important, but getting make sure you have no wheel spin, getting in the right rev range and whatnot is generally more important for us.
Yeah. Believe it or not, Kelsey talks about RPM too. You got RPM with your javelin quickly, haven't you, Kelsey? When you talk about the RPM of how the javelin actually goes, which
Yeah,
again,
the revolutions.
is amazing.
Yeah. So it's actually kind of cool. You see it most often with the javelins that have spirals painted on them. But yeah, you want to sort of hit that on release and create as much torque through the javelin as possible. Helps it sort of like fly through the air, pierce the air essentially. Yeah.
Sensational. Mitch, for you've always been a pretty starter, mate. But what did you do anything specific for when you get into the car? I mean, obviously, Oscar made some good points about just obviously getting the mind and muscle memory and getting everything sort of all the middle ear and sort of the reactions synced up with some external loading with tennis balls and the rest of it. But once you're in the car, is there anything you can sort of do? How do you feel you perform best with some of your starts without giving too much weight to these other dudes you're blowing away at the moment?
I mean, well, Formula E is a bit different because we don't have a clutch. We've got, I mean, it's an electric motor. Everything's quite instant. It's a direct drive. So it's actually, from all my sort of race car starts since I started, they're probably the least stressful because, as Oscar touched on, like with the clutch release, managing the wheel spin, not getting too much slip, not stalling, these sort of things are sort of out of the window. So that's to get a good start is relatively straightforward. But I guess I've gone through like a lot of different range of sort of warm-up procedures, skipping, tennis balls, juggling, press up, just anything. But I've sort of noticed the calmer I am in terms of heart rate, the more sort of composure I have, and then I've got a bit more control over releasing the clutch and stuff when I was in GP2 or F2, F3. I mean, it just depends what works for you, right? Some people like to bang a few espressos in. Some people like to, like Kimmy, like he would be asleep moments before getting in the car. Just depends on what is most consistent for you to repeat and to try and control that clutch phase. It's all hand control on the clutch. It's not foot control, which was probably a bit more natural. On the hand is a bit more unnatural. So anything to make that as natural as possible and consistent is I mean, even in GP2, when I was at the end of my GP2 stuff, it was still really nerve-wracking to get it right because the clutches are so aggressive. To get that nice smooth release is not easy.
Yeah. I don't know about you guys, but I've been having a lot of trouble with the pantry in this situation. The pantry has been a big problem for me. And I'm not competing, so I can put a little bit of mud on and I can try and get rid of it, and it doesn't really matter if I do. But quickly, how are you guys going with? Again, it's sort of you're ready to go. There's no real clear goals for sports people, like really defined goals to sort of hit and have targets. Obviously, we really don't have anything to schedule-wise. It's a pain. I know you're about to go shopping, Max, so you've got to get out the door. So don't go shopping on an empty stomach because that's a disaster. That. So, but is it easy to keep pretty disciplined with the pantry, or the sort of the big fellas sort of calling you in, Max, and sort of the pantry will win in the battle, and you're starting to put a bit of mud on?
The pantry's winning a little bit, but I haven't really put on too much weight or anything like that yet, so that's a good sign. But I've been trying to keep out of the house as much as possible. I feel like that's a good way just to avoid pantry.
Yeah. Oscar, that pantry, I know your cooking's lighting up, but is that pantry getting the tune up?
Yeah. I mean, Mum doesn't get to see me that often, so when I'm home, she, usually gives me a couple of home cooked specials. But I mean, it's going back to normal now. I won't lie. There was a little bit of a
wobble early on.
A happy hour going on. But my training's been consistent. So in terms of training, it's been all right. Just the pantry, as I'm sure for a lot of people, got the better of me a little bit, but sort of trying to settle that back down now.
Yeah, good lad. Well, if we do another one of these, I can still see a jawline there, mate. So I don't want to see that chin. Yeah. Mitch, I know you're super disciplined. You hate chocolate, you hate ice cream, you hate all that sort of stuff. So yeah. So
Haribo as well. Haribo.
yeah,
I hate.
you hate Haribos, you hate all that. But yeah. So you win,
Been
mate.
pretty good.
Yeah, good lad.
Pretty,
yeah.
pretty good. To be honest, a few Haribo packets didn't last long in the early days, just to get through them. But to be honest, I've been quite impressed with myself, being relatively disciplined. I think I just know, because I can't get out so much. The more I pack on now, the more I'm going to try and get off later on. So I'm just trying to manage that a bit. But yeah, for sure, the crisps and a few Twixes have gone pretty quickly. So yeah, but I'll try and keep on top of it. I know Mark, he keeps an eye on me and make sure I'm not getting too ahead of myself. So
It's
yeah,
only one,
but it's all good.
one pinch test to know how much is there. So just
Exactly.
grab that love handle. Yeah. Kelsey, I don't know if you can't talk about it. You don't need to, but in terms of it's something for all of us at the moment, isn't it? To try and manage our volume intake, which is because the board. When you're bored, I know what I do when I'm bored. I just go straight. I've got all this fruit here. It's great, rah, and I'm going to go have a mint slice. I'm going to have a cherry.
Yeah. Oh no, well, I do the shopping, so, and I go on a full stomach. So I know the basic rules of like trying to not pick up those tasty treats. But honestly, the thing that's getting me the most is the cooler weather. It's just like you're more inclined to like want those like comfort foods. And again, like this is sort of new territory for me. I'm normally in the heat in the summer most of the year, which is so much more conducive to like salads and fresh fruits and like quite simple dishes. So I'm kind of having to just redesign the menu to sort of be like, I want something that's going to keep me warm and toasty, but not be like overindulgent. So yeah, it's kind of it's new territory for me.
That's the balance, yeah. Well, thankfully there's only one of you in the slightly cooler conditions. So all the other boys in northern hemisphere. So I think unless anyone's got any killer question or anything they want to ask someone before they go, I think we can probably wrap it up there. It's nearly an hour, goes reasonably quick, but and it's always also tricky to get around everyone, obviously. But yeah, thanks for everyone's calling from different parts of the world. I think it's great to catch up with all of you guys. It's been a good little jam session, let's say, and yeah, I even was clean shave for you guys. I mean, this was a bloody effort, I must say.
Me too. It's the first time in a month.
Yeah, yeah, your mitts looks pretty young too, mate. So, but thanks, guys, for your time. Really appreciate it, and yeah, all the very best. Stay strong and motivated, and all those things which you guys are world class. You're on fire, so we'll be out of this hopefully pretty soon. So look forward to talking to you all again soon. All the best.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Thanks, guys.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers, Mark.
Yeah, thank you. Nice to meet you.
Yeah. See you, Max.
See you
Good luck
guys.
with the shopping, Max.
Yes, thank you.
There you go.
See you guys.
Bye.
See you later.
Bye.